The Fry Cook and the Elves revolves around SpongeBob accidentally causing some silly characters to make his life difficult, and he struggles to get rid of them. It's About Mime revolves around SpongeBob accidentally causing a silly character to make his life difficult, and then he struggles to get rid of them. These episodes aired back to back. Yeah. What's going on here? Chapter 1. Sister episodes. So these two episodes have some differences, but as far as the cartoon trope they fall into, they are exactly the same. The trope in question is X follows around Y and makes the life of Y difficult. And these two episodes replace X with either Elves or a Mime, and replace Y with SpongeBob. And beyond that, they are basically exactly the same. SpongeBob unknowingly welcomes the wacky character into his life, and they make his life worse for a bit, and then at the end of the episode, he gets rid of them. Beyond that, are there differences? Sure. The comedy bits they do are different with the Elves as compared to the Mime. The stakes are slightly different, with the Elves threatening SpongeBob's job security, whereas the stakes of the Mime is just that he's really annoying. And each episode could have had a different lesson if either episode bothered to have a lesson. I mean, Fry Cook and the Elves kinda has a lesson about how good deeds can have unintended consequences, and It's About Mime is kinda about not giving attention to people who might not leave you alone. But I had to really stretch my imagination to assign these lessons to these episodes. Clearly, the writers didn't care about anything more than having nonsense happen with whichever kind of wacky character each respective episode was about. And I wouldn't have noticed this if these episodes were not in the same season. Heck, I might not have noticed even if they were a few episodes apart in the same season. But nope, they aired one after another as sister episodes. So in case you didn't know, the term sister episode refers to the other 11-minute episode that airs at the same time as the first one. SpongeBob's sister episodes aren't often similar to one another, to the point where I think there is sometimes a bit of discretion by the team behind the show to make sure that sister episodes are a bit different from one another. For example, one of my favorite unexpected pairs of episodes is Nasty Patty and Idiot Box. Not only are these episodes completely different location-wise, what with Nasty Patty being a Krusty Krab episode and Idiot Box being a Con Street episode, but each episode is completely different in terms of tone, and feature different characters to be foils to SpongeBob, with Mr. Krabs in Nasty Patty and Squidward in Idiot Box. So we get to see different character dynamics in each episode. Other great episode pairings include Arg and Rock Bottom, Dying for Pie and Imitation Crabs, and The Secret Box and Band Geeks. In fact, I went through every episode pairing in the first 3 seasons, and every single episode pairing is wildly different thematically, with one exception, being Scaredy Pants and I Was a Teenage Gary, which both have scary themes. But 1, those episodes are still pretty different, and 2, if you argue they are similar, it was on purpose, because it was the show's first Halloween special. From here, I can draw no other conclusion that the team behind the show, at this time, actively made sure that the sister episode pairings were thematically different enough so that when you watched both episodes in a row, you as the viewer got more of a variety of what the show had to offer. If 2 episodes were assigned to each other randomly, we would have inevitably gotten 2 episodes in a row focusing on Squidward or focusing on Plankton stealing the formula, but in those first 3 seasons, that just doesn't happen. Beyond the first 3 seasons, I still think that the team behind the show, for the most part, still adhered to this rule. But there are a couple of times I think it didn't, like Season 6's pairing of Chum Bucket Supreme and Single Cell Anniversary, which are both Plankton episodes that take place in the Chum Bucket, though at least both of those episodes aren't primarily about Plankton stealing the formula, and give him a different motivation. But then there's another pairing in Season 7, Someone's in the Kitchen with Sandy and The Inside Job, which are 2 Plankton formula stealing attempt episodes back to back, which really never happened before this. I mean, unless you count his attempt to steal the formula in Culture Shock because it's paired with fun, but I don't think that really counts because Culture Shock isn't a Plankton formula episode. I remember this pairing in particular because I hated both of these episodes as a kid. So not only are we watching 2 mediocre episodes in a row, but we're watching 2 episodes that follow the same character and have the same formula, no pun intended. But anyway, all this to say that the placement of sister episodes should not be arbitrary. If SpongeBob is watched out of order, you could end up watching just about any episode. But sister episodes are always tied to one another, and having them be meaningfully different is important for the viewing experience. So with all that being said, let's examine Fry Cook and the Elves and It's About Mime back to back, see how they are similar, compare their differences, and break down what went wrong. Chapter 2. The Fry Cook and the Elves. So let's get into the Fry Cook and the Elves. The episode opens on Mr. Krabs dealing with urchins in the kitchen. I appreciate that this opening action sequence is not too hyperactive. Krabs smacks them around and one of them bites his butt. That's just about it. It's well paced and doesn't have a lot of overcompensating action that a lot of modern SpongeBob openings suffer from. Mr. Krabs throwing the last urchin at the others like a bowling ball was a nice little bit of animation to round out the opening. SpongeBob later feels bad for the urchins and decides to feed them a Krabby Patty. This moment not only serves as the inciting incident for the episode, but also endears us to SpongeBob as a character and makes us root for him more. We then see that the urchins were actually elves, who then help SpongeBob make Krabby Patties as repayments for his good deeds. We'll get into how the plot unfolds in a minute, but I know it's a common complaint, but do they even remember this show takes place underwater? So here's the thing about SpongeBob's underwater setting. Yes, it does have not underwater things in it all the time. Fires underwater, burger restaurants underwater, men in gorilla suits underwater. But in the case of something like a fire underwater, it's a sort of thing where the fire is something that is so common in real life that it would be difficult to write around the use of fire, and fire is so inconsequential to a scene or plot that it breaking the physics of the world often goes unnoticed. And plus, sometimes they do make a joke out of it.
Hey, if we're underwater, how could there be a...
In the case of something like the Krusty Krab, its existence is an element of the underwater society. Yes, they live underwater, but they also act like people, so they have establishments that are like the ones we see in the human world, like a restaurant. And as for something like the underwater gorilla from I Had an Accident, the fact that the gorilla doesn't belong underwater is not only acknowledged by the narrative for the sake of comedy, but its existence reinforces the themes of that episode, being that SpongeBob has imaginary fears of going outside. And by representing those fears through this underwater gorilla, it's communicating that SpongeBob's fears are as non-existent as an underwater gorilla. These elves do not fit any of this criteria. Unlike underwater fire, the elves are significant to the plot and focused on making their not underwaterness much more noticeable. Unlike the Krusty Krab, magical elves do not exist in the real world, so their existence here is not just SpongeBob's underwater world mimicking the real world. And unlike the gorilla, the elves not belonging underwater is never brought up by the characters, and them not belonging underwater does not contribute to the themes or the story. And the fixes to this would have been so easy. You could have just made them fish elves. Like, maybe there could have been a more creative sort of fish-like mythical creature you could have used instead, but elves look like people, so elves in SpongeBob's world could just look like the fish people. Why are they human elves? Really, look me in the face and say that the fact that they were human elves improved the episode. There was actually a comment I got a while back, I think on my Gorilla Suit Day video, that theorized that some of the artists working on SpongeBob are actually bitter that they're working on SpongeBob and wish they were working on a different show, which is why you see so many non-underwater sorts of character designs. It's because the artists just kind of wish they were doing their own thing instead of working on what is to them a cynical corporate show that just pays the bills. And the reason the early seasons leaned so heavily into the underwater aesthetic was because all of those artists were the ones who built the show and were passionate about its underwater setting. This is complete conjecture, by the way, but I thought it was an interesting thing to think about. Okay, so looking past all that, how are the elves used within the plot of the episode? Well, it's definitely trying to tell a story where SpongeBob grapples with his identity as a fry cook as the elves doing his job for him threatens that job. There's this one joke where SpongeBob says how boring his day was when he wasn't at work, and it shows a montage of SpongeBob doing a bunch of important and fun things, and this joke really works for setting the stakes for the rest of the episode. We as the audience get the joke, haha, he's doing all this fun stuff, but wishing he was at his lame burger flipping job, but at the same time, we buy that SpongeBob cares about his job that much, and it makes us care about whether or not he keeps that job. It's actually looking like in this episode, SpongeBob is, dare I say, an actual character. If you've seen my recent video, SpongeBob and Patrick aren't characters anymore, you would know that one of the biggest problems with modern SpongeBob is how SpongeBob is just kind of a blank slate, and the story kind of happens around him. And this episode, by communicating to us how much SpongeBob cares about his job, gets around that and makes him a character. Now, this doesn't mean that the show is going to get better in this regard, as so far, more of Season 17 has not character SpongeBob as opposed to actual character SpongeBob. So it's probably more of a stopped clock is right twice a day situation, where SpongeBob being an actual character in this episode just kind of happened by accident, because the writers found a way to utilize him well in this particular plot. Whereas if the team behind SpongeBob really wanted to fix this problem, they would have an actual rule where every SpongeBob-focused episode is required to do things that make him an actual character. As for the elves themselves, I do think they work pretty well as villains, if you can look past the missed opportunity of them not being sea creatures. What makes them interesting as villains of the episode is that they are a supernatural entity that are bound to specific rules which were put in place for a good reason, being that their creed is that they do good deeds for whoever did a good deed for them, and this supernatural rule in SpongeBob's case makes his life worse, which leans into the main theme of the episode, which is sometimes good actions have negative consequences. But once again, while I give this episode points for having this theme, I can't help but feel like it's another broken clock is right twice a day situation. I mean, I guess it makes sense what happened twice, huh? That is how often broken clocks are right each day. Like, this theme about the unintended consequences of kindness just happened by accident, and I can tell this is the case by the fact that this theme is not reinforced with the episode's ending. We get an action sequence of SpongeBob dealing with the elves, which, to give it some positives, is creatively animated and shows SpongeBob standing up for himself, which is good because he's often such a pushover in modern episodes. But after the action sequence, the conflict just ends, because it was time for the episode to end, I guess. Mr. Krabs gets rid of them, and now they're Plankton's problem. What this episode was really missing was a tangible character flaw for SpongeBob. And if they had just understood their main theme, being too nice has unintended consequences, they could have had SpongeBob adopt this as his main character flaw. Like, a simple rewrite that would have improved the story tenfold would have been to have SpongeBob successfully get rid of the elves, only to do something nice again and get stuck with them. You know, a fool me once, fool me twice kind of thing. And if the writers just had a big board on the wall that said writing rules, with one of the rules being protagonist must have a character flaw that gets challenged. I don't know why that's not industry standard at this point. I think they would have easily come up with something better. Chapter 3. It's About Mime. It's About Mime revolves around SpongeBob dealing with a mime. The mime is introduced imitating people in a park. The bits themselves are pretty funny and do establish how the mime is kind of obnoxious with how he makes fun of people, but I do question if they should have used cartoon logic to have the mime literally morph his face to imitate people. Like, think about it. Unlike the elves in the episode before, mimes are not supernatural beings capable of magically changing their face. The point of a mime is that they are so convincing with their performance that you believe that they are imitating you. And I think that the cartoon breaking the laws of physics is almost cheating what a mime is supposed to be. And I'm not bringing this up to complain that it doesn't make logical sense that the mime changes his face. SpongeBob is obviously allowed to not make logical sense. But that doesn't mean that not making logical sense is always the best choice for a story. I think that sometimes a little restriction can go a long way, and if the writers and board artists challenge themselves to have the mime only perform within the laws of physics, much like a real mime would, I think it would have made for a more interesting episode and a more interesting antagonist. By the way, I think that this only applies to the opening scene. I think later on, when the mime breaks the laws of physics, it could have worked, but I'll explain that later. So the mime starts following around SpongeBob because he tipped him a dime, and
Everyone knows you never give a mime a dime.
you know, I actually wasn't sure if this was a real saying or if it was something made up for the episode, so I looked up if it was an actual phrase. And it seems like they actually did come up with this rhyme about mimes and dimes for this episode. And I learned that from this extremely useful and totally worth leveling towns and draining the ocean to build data centers for AI overview that explains that everyone knows you never give a mime a dime is a famous running gag. Wow, guys, congrats. The episode isn't even a week old, and this is already a famous running gag. Oh wait, now if you search "never give a mime a dime" quote, you get an AI overview that says it has appeared in various cartoons, sitcoms, and comedy routines over the decades, when there is literally nothing I could find that used this quote besides the SpongeBob episode. Huh. Maybe instead of never give a mime a dime, it should be don't give billions of dollars to sociopaths who want to make robots that make people stupid. I wonder if I could get that saying to rhyme. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so after the mime starts following around SpongeBob, we get 4 straight minutes of bits where the mime makes SpongeBob's life difficult. And it's like,
I get it!
we could already tell that the mime was a problem when it took Squidward's job and disrupted the workflow at the Krusty Krab. Did we really need a whole scene where SpongeBob goes home and the mime pretends to be Gary by taking out his eyeballs and gets inside SpongeBob's mirror? I guess the joke where Mirror SpongeBob showed up and was like, what did I miss, was kind of funny, but it wasn't worth this very obviously padding section of the episode. So then Plankton gets involved and reveals how you get rid of a mime.
The best way to get rid of a mime is to make it talk.
Okay, so this is an improvement over Fry Cook and the Elves, where in that episode, there wasn't really any in-universe rule that allowed SpongeBob to get rid of them, which led to the ending where getting rid of them was just Mr. Krabs smacking them out of the restaurant. Lame. So a rule about getting rid of the mime by making him talk is compelling, and it also fits with what a mime is. Plankton then gets this giant robot thing and says he's going to torture the mime to get him to talk. So then we get more moments where the mime breaks the laws of physics. And I think that in these situations, in this fight scene, the mime breaking the laws of physics was justified by the writing of the episode. You know, something like using an invisible wall to block the laser beam, well, yes, definitely an obvious joke to do in this situation, was a pretty cool way to have the mime participate in the fight. So yes, even though I did say earlier that I didn't like how the mime broke the laws of physics to morph his face in the beginning scenes because I felt that wasn't true to what a mime does, in the ending fight, breaking the laws of physics is earned. Because 1, the fight is already a cartoonish situation, unlike the establishing scenes that were more grounded, and 2, the mime suddenly being able to break the laws of physics here and not at the beginning raises the stakes during a point of action. So yeah, because of all this, the final fight does really work. It's a decently long action sequence going on for a full 2 minutes, but I don't take issue with the length of the fight, especially since it uses its whole mime theme to the fullest. I'm a bit conflicted about why the mime talks. It's because he stubs his toe. Like, don't get me wrong, it's funny, but I can't help but feel similarly towards this that I do towards the end of Fry Cook and the Elves. The mime stubbing his toe is not the result of any character overcoming a character flaw, it's more so just a thing that happens to end the story. Like, if the ending was the mime stubbing his toe and talking, but the reason he stubbed his toe was because SpongeBob made some kind of character breakthrough, then it would have felt more earned. And then some other mimes show up and take away the mime's mime license. It's a pretty clever moment. And that's when I realized that that's really the only props I can give to these episodes. They have clever moments. Fry Cook and the Elves, with the elves taking SpongeBob's job and the bit about SpongeBob thinking doing a bunch of cool stuff is boring. The fight against the mime talking, the mime mafia, the ending where the mime becomes a clown. These are all nothing more than a couple of clever moments. And if you like this episode, you are mistaking clever moments with a good episode, when really, those things are just not the same. I don't want people who liked these episodes to feel bad about it, but if all you have to say in defense of these episodes is there were some funny moments or I liked the visuals, well, that doesn't actually make a good episode. And if that's all you think about these episodes, we probably agree on how these episodes should have been approached. Everything that you liked about these episodes would not have been sacrificed if they actually leaned into their respective themes and told a more coherent story. In fact, the stuff that you liked about it, all these clever moments, would have been even funnier. And if even after all that, you insist that these are in fact good episodes, then I would like to hear any actual argument. Chapter 4. Why did this happen? Real quick before we get into the next chapter, I would like to give a thank you to my Patreon and channel members. If you'd like to support the channel and get your name up here, either join below for channel memberships or for Patreon, which has some extra perks. Check the link in the description. So let's circle back and discuss why these 2 episodes that have basically the same story aired at the same time. And beyond the obvious, it's because the people behind this show do not care, I think I have some interesting observations as to why this happened. And it goes off of some of the conclusions of my previous two Modern SpongeBob Bad videos. In my Lady in the Lighthouse video, I pointed out that the reason that we got another noir parody episode a few seasons after Squid Noir aired was because something like a noir parody was much easier of an idea to put into your 20 episode order to chip away at the new ideas you have to come up with. A typical cartoon trope like what if elves annoy our main character is a similar sort of thing. Easy to come up with. And in my Home Away from Home video, I pointed out how SpongeBob as a show is struggling to create fresh ideas. And while I don't think it's feasibly possible to ever run out of ideas for a show, not all ideas are equally easy to come up with and execute, which leads to these season 17 episodes having a lot of half-baked ideas that do very little with their characters. So these writing problems led to the creation of these episodes. But even with that being the case, why are they sister episodes? Like, wouldn't it have been easy to just throw It's About Mime like 3 episodes later? And that's really the part of this that bothers me. This decision speaks to the absolute apathy that the people behind SpongeBob have for this show. The only way that this happened is that when they were structuring the season, they had their list of ideas, and they had SpongeBob gets followed around by elves and SpongeBob gets followed around by a mime next to each other. And then they just didn't move them and let them end up together because who cares? And think about what I said earlier about the first 3 seasons that went out of their way to make sure sister episodes were different. Look, I often argue that the bad writing in episodes, such as characters not having arcs, is the result of someone behind the show not caring about the audience. And I will be fair and say that I do not know that for sure. My accusation of apathy is just that, an accusation. Perhaps these writers just really suck at their jobs. Of course, this is unlikely considering they are professional writers, but I digress. But this, having 2 episodes like this right next to one another, this does not take a high level of writing skill to notice. This is just a complete and utter lack of care for something as easy to control as the order in which episodes air. And I don't think there is any more proof that there are people behind this show that don't care about it. And I think that's just kind of sad. But you know what else is sad? How much the people of Bikini Bottom hated Patrick's song in the episode Sing a Song from Patrick, which I discussed in my very first SpongeBob theory video, the Twinkle Twinkle Patrick Star theory. It takes Patrick's silly song from that one episode and just dives super deep into some crazy stuff about how the people of Bikini Bottom hate the arts, and that's why they hate Patrick's song. It's a lot of fun, and you should click this link right here to check it out. Or if you want to watch some of my anti-AI SpongeBob channel live streams, you can click on this link right here. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next time.